I'll call it. You know, I think the one quote out of that story that Jim is known for more than any other, and I've been to more meetings than I care to admit, is the quote where he talks about, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. I think that story is known for those few words more than anything. And people have talked about studying the book, and Bill W. is so clever, because the real lesson that I must learn from Jim's story is beneath the surface of where he says fails to enlarge his spiritual life. The real lesson from Jim's story is not that his boss was mad and the few words he had, "Where the hell were you Monday?" The real lesson from Jim's story is not that he was the inventor of the White Russian drink, you know. The real lesson, I have to look a little further, and some of you may already know this, but I think it bears mentioning, since we're talking about Jim, we're talking about learning from the book and learning from the lessons that the book has to offer me. Jim was a card-carrying atheist, and he would get up and scream at people when they would mention God in meetings. This is a true story. You can look it up. And Jim is the reason we have As We Understood Him in Step 3 and Step 11, because Bill got so sick of hearing him screaming and yelling, he said, "Look, if I add As We Understood Him at the end of them sentences, will you let me, in the end of them 2 steps, will you let me finish writing this book and stop disrupting AA?" And they struck that compromise. Now, this is all the true story. You can go look this up. So now that I see him say he failed to enlarge his spiritual life, it takes on a whole new meaning. And I have to know that Bill W. knew this, because he just got through brawling with the dude about it. So Bill W. puts in there he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. How tongue-in-cheek and how clever, because there was no way I could have possibly known the facts underneath the surface of that unless I go read another AA history book, AA Comes of Age, Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. It's almost as if he says, if you really want to get the real lesson from this story, go seek out other things, because it's hidden underneath the surface. And what is the real promise in Jim's story? And this is the good news that I really get from this story, now that I know what's underneath the surface, is that Jim got sober. And Jim stayed sober. And the real promise of this story, Jim came around to our way of thinking, is my point. Finally, through all the fighting, through the militantness that this guy was going through, meetings and everything, the real promise of this story is, if whatever problem I think I have with God when I get here, I mean, I've never claimed to be an atheist. I mean, even our book says few people really are. It would mean blind faith in the proposition that the universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. Bill talks about on 28 and the 12 and 12 that he defines atheism as somebody who has proof of the non-existence of God. I've never seen anybody present any proof. So this idea gets batted around, but, you know, the real lesson from Jim's story is, whatever problem I came in here with God, whether it was the God of my childhood still circling the First Baptist Church, striking down sinners, and I need to conceive of a new, more forgiving God, it's in no way the kind of problem that Jim had. And if Jim got sober, then there ain't no doubt that I can get sober. That's the real lesson in the promise from Jim's story. It ain't about White Russians and arguing with bosses. And that's why I say again, Bill W. is so clever. How clever was he to put that in there, knowing the history of Jim, not to mention it in the book, and then to throw that he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. And then when I find out why, you're going, oh, wow, it's no wonder, my friend. It's no wonder he had a problem. I have very much less of a problem, and I have very much less of an excuse to not get this program now that I know Jim's story, don't I? I've had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps in my past.
Thank you, Mike.